I have the honor of introducing Jessika Satori. Jessica is going to be moderating this next session. She'll be handling some questions with our guest star, Harry Manfredini. So I'm going to just say very briefly that Jessica is a gifted filmmaker. I had the privilege of being in a workshop with her. She pulled us up and made us go through some acting and then showed us some of the results of what she's learned about filmmaking. She's gifted in that area, and I know that she'll do a great job here of interacting with our guests. So with that, I'm going to turn over to Jessica, who lives in Ojai, California. Is that right, Jessica?
Thank you. And then I'd like to bring Harry Manfredini up. And I think you've heard enough about him, but I get the
plenty enough about him.
But I get the honor and privilege of asking him some questions, and then we'll open it up to the audience. And he and I already had an hour-long phone conversation, so this will be a really good time.
You're not going to ask me any of those, right?
Okay. So the first question I had for Harry was, how did you know you were going to be a film scorer and professional?
Okay, well, this is our conversation on the phone. We should have just taped this. We could have sent it in. We could be eating right now. Right down the street. There's a restaurant right down the street. The odd thing about this is that I wanted to be a film composer for probably 6 or 7 years old when I first started to study music. For some reason or other, music and film really spoke to me. It's something that I wanted to do. I had no idea how to do it. I had no idea how I was going to be able to do it. But for some reason or other, that's what I liked. My musical background at home was a kind of a dichotomous sort of thing in the sense that my father listened to Puccini, so I think that's where I got my drama. And my brother listened to, at the time in the early 50s, a fellow named Stan Kenton. I don't know if you know who that is. It's progressive jazz, very kind of avant-garde jazz, at least at that time. And I always thought it was avant-garde until I went to school and found out that it was about 70 years behind what avant-garde really was at the time. So it's sort of like what I wanted to do. And do you want me to tell the story about the piano? Is that
I do.
The thing?
I do.
It's a really strange thing, and it occurred to me not a couple of years ago, but I had a reoccurring fantasy dream sort of thing. I'm not sure what it was, but I dreamt that I wanted to be a film composer, but I felt that I had this magic piano. Now, this magic piano was really cool, and I was in this room where the film would be projected over my head, kind of like the screen here, but I had this magic piano that if I wanted trumpets, I could play the piano and it would be trumpets. And if I wanted drums, I could play the piano and it would be drums. It would be whatever I wanted it to be. And for the last 20 years, I sit in a room where the picture is projected over my head, and I have a keyboard in front of me where I literally can play any sound that I want. And it struck me, I just went, whoa. It's one of those like whoa moments, I went, this is exactly sort of like what I thought about. I mean, I just select trumpets and play the keyboard, and there they are. So be careful what you dream.
Yeah.
Okay?
You're way ahead of your time there. That was great.
I was ahead of my time, I guess. Yeah.
So what kind of breaks or what kind of people came along to help you?
Well, we don't have that kind of time, but there were a lot of them. I did study music. I was a saxophone player, and like every good Italian boy, I learned to play the accordion. So when I play the piano, I have a really good right hand, and I have no idea what to do with this hand. This is to hold the coffee, evidently. So I I did study for a long time, and I did think jazz was like this jazz that I knew. I studied that, and I knew that when I went to college. And it was when I went to college where I met a few teachers who helped me discover all the other music that I didn't know, starting from Haydn and Mozart and Strauss, Richard Strauss, not Johann Strauss, Richard Strauss and Wagner and Debussy and Stravinsky and everybody in the 20th century. And the music just blew me away, because what's really weird is that a lot of the early film music, which is what I was watching with my mom as a kid, that really, when you think of Miklos Rozsa and Furtwängler and all these guys who scored films, they were all European composers, and basically they were writing Brahms and stuff like that. I mean, you listen to old scores and you're like, that's just Brahms, you know, it's pretty much that's what they wrote. So that music really got to me, and I just felt like there was a whole bunch of stuff that I had to learn. Unfortunately, I had a great fear. Fear is a horrible thing to have. And I know a lot of you have aspirations for a lot of different things, and I can tell you, if you can get past the fear, you can do almost anything. And I had a lot of fear, and eventually I gave up a lot of times. In college, I gave up being a composer. I went to DePaul University to get a bachelor's degree in composition, and literally the fear of having someone, I realized how much I didn't know, and so I felt I was overblown. I just thought of about 70 things I could talk about here. I'm sorry, I'm going to put this coffee down. I just was so afraid, so I became an education major. I found out that I was really good at conducting, and of course I had jazz, that I always had. So I went and got a master's based basically on the fact that I could play jazz, and I got a master's in theory, not in composition but in theory, and not a master's in theory. I got a master's in music theory. I actually got a master's. I got a master's in theory. Yeah. No, I actually got a master's in theory, and I was really good at that, theory and analysis, and I actually started to teach at university, and that was really cool, because, hey, here I am a professor, I don't even have to write. But, I pretty much given that up. However, I realized that when you start teaching, when you're just an assistant professor, or what's the lowest professor? Assistant, yeah. I was a junk professor once too in New Jersey. I think that was mule. I'm not sure. It was kind of like mule. But anyway, eventually it came back, and I failed at one point as a teacher, just because there was something about it that I didn't want to do. And I realized I had to get a doctorate, and so I looked around the country, and there were 4 schools that I was going to go to. Oddly, one was in New York, one was Stanford, one was USC, one was Florida. So I had a choice of the box. And anyway, Columbia University of New York gave me a scholarship. So I went to Columbia, and basically was going to be a conductor. I was going to be a conducting major, and I had a teacher there down at Fort Nudo who really spoke to me, and he was a jazzer and became a composer. I also met a fellow there named Bill Ramel, who was a record producer, and he took me under his wing, and I started working on records and stuff like that. When I was a kid at 16 years old, I was playing 7 gigs a night in high school, playing saxophone. I played recording sessions when I was 16 years old on saxophone. So I had been in the recording studio, but again, I let all that go because I went to school. I had to figure out what Stravinsky was doing. I couldn't play rock and roll anymore. So anyway, he took me under his wing, and I know this is the question. This is what you're waiting for me to get to. One day, Bill, we're not going to go into the porn stuff. We're not going to go into that.
I was waiting for that.
Oh, okay. We were working on recording a record in this studio, and Bill and I just knew each other from school. So we were driving home one day, and he looked at me and he said, well, what is it you want to do? And I said, well, you know, I want to write film scores. And that's sort of the way I said it. And he said, well, what are you going to write that Mancini or Jerry Goldsmith can't write? And at that point, I just stopped and I went, well, I don't know. I don't know what I'm going to write. I don't even know if I can even write like that, you know? And I don't know. And he just said to me, okay, if that's what you want to do, you've got to do this, 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 and this. And just said, go do it. The next day, I walked into that recording studio, and the guy was making porn films on the side. He was trying to learn to make porn films. And I said, I'll write you your theme song for free. And he said, fine. And I said, so he said, the movie was called Slip Up. And the plot was, as you can imagine, everybody was stooping and everything was going wrong. Nuclear reactors were going wrong. It was terrible. But anyway, so I said I could do that. So I went home and I wrote a Bo Diddley tune. Those of you who are in music know what Bo Diddley is, don't you? You know, they used to call it the hand jive, but it's really Bo Diddley. That was his lick. So I wrote this Bo Diddley song called Slip Up. And bam, it was in the movie. And at the same time, this guy, someone needed a shoe commercial. So we took the same song, changed all the words, and turned it into a shoe commercial. Hey, waste not, want not. That's what this guy did.
Right.
So anyway, and then there was another guy in the same recording studio when we were doing the album who said, you know, I have someone who's doing wants to do some songs. And I said, I'll do the tracks for free. And he goes, really? I said, yeah, I'll do it for free. He said, they didn't know me from anybody. We were just there. They didn't know. I didn't know what I was doing. So anyway, I wrote these two arrangements for these songs. A guy walking through the hall says, that sounds like film music. And I went, well, yeah, I guess it does. And he says, would you write this piece for this film that I'm doing? And I said, sure, I'll do it for free. And I did it for free. The next thing you know, a friend of mine says, in New York, there's this paper, I'm sure there's one out here, it's called Backstage. It's for actors and trying to get gigs. A friend of mine calls and says, hey, there's a composer who's looking for an assistant who needs someone. And I said, well, all I have are my shoe commercial, my two songs that sound like film music, and a porn tune, you know. So, and plus whatever I was writing at school at Columbia, which was, you know. So I walked into the office, the guy looked at it, and he goes, yeah, this looks pretty good. Here, orchestrate this, bring it in tomorrow. I walked in, brought it in, and he said, good, here, now orchestrate these and bring them in tomorrow. The next week, I was conducting a 57-piece orchestra in New York City on a film score.
Wow, incredible.
In that year, we scored 2 short films, like you did here. One was called The End of the Game, and one was called Angel and Big Joe. Someone mentioned Paul Sorvino today. Was it you?
Yeah.
It was Paul Sorvino's first film, Angel and Big Joe, and The End of the Game was a documentary about animals dying in Africa. It was a documentary. Both pictures won the Academy Award for Best Documentary and Best Short. My friend, the guy who I was working for, said, this is amazing, I got to go to California, this is my big break. So here I sit in New York City with one score, one porn film theme, one shoe commercial, and 2 pieces of tape, sitting in an office, and someone said, hey, are you the guys who did Angel and Big Joe? And I said, yeah. And he said, well, I've got this kids film, would you like to score it? And I went, sure. But I didn't say I'll do it for free. But I just figured, hey, I get paid this time. So anyway, so I did this film. It was called Elizabeth and the Marsh Mystery. It was a wonderful children's film. And I still do children's film for this guy. I probably have done 17 of them. I did all the corduroy movies. I did A Boy, a Dog, and a Frog. I did all kinds of famous books that he had turned into live action, non-verbal films. So it's just me, the music, and the picture. I did a bunch of them. However, this guy said to me, says, I know somebody in Connecticut who's doing a children's film. And I said, hey, maybe you'd like to do it. I'd love to do it. Some guy named Sean Cunningham, who's doing this movie called Here Come the Tigers. Were you involved in that?
I wrote it. Yeah.
He wrote it, Here Come the Tigers. He wrote the script.
Under a pseudonym.
Under a pseudonym, Lefty Gomez or something. Arch McCoy, right, yes. I think I scored it under a pseudonym. But anyway, we did that. A picture didn't work out. Then he did another one. And then he did a movie called Friday the 13th. And I was on the friggin' map. That's how easy it is to do. Okay. But what you got to get rid of is being afraid. You got to get past it. Just keep going. Just keep going. Anyway, is that enough of that?
That's good. That's A+.
Thank you.
There you go. Well, speaking of fear, does fear factor into when you started creating scores for horror films?
Yeah, because I'm a baby and a sissy and stuff like that, and I think that one of the reasons I'm good at it is because I'm afraid of horror pictures myself. And so I really react to them. And what's really blows a lot of people's mind is I'm not a horror film fan. I don't particularly like horror films. It just turns out I'm good at it. And I think one of the reasons that I'm good at it is that I really react viscerally to them. So, and I'm able to draw on that drama and the idea of music that is less melodic, more cacophonous, more aleatoric. I used aleatoric just to make it seem like I'm smart. By the way, I never got my doctorate at Columbia. I did all the coursework. I took the orals. I wrote I never wrote the dissertation, so I have an ABD from Columbia. I ended up I just started working in New York and doing films and doing records and stuff like that, and I just went, hey, I don't have to move to East Overshoe, Iowa, and teach music theory and stuff like that. So, and everything sort of worked out, and rather quickly too.
Great. Okay. How about if you had 4 or 5 people, producers, calling you and saying, "I want you to do my score. I want you to do." How do you select a score that you want?
I don't. I take them all. I just go like, my sister is sick. I've got to get your hold off for a while. No, I try to work it out. I mean, right now I'm doing 2 pictures. And I'm nervous, and I actually walked away from a third one. It was too much to do. It's too much work because I work pretty much by myself most of the time, and it's really hard to do. I am very much. If someone came to me, for example, you would come to me and you said, "I've got this Western," right. I would jump up and down to do a Western. If you came up to me with a movie that wasn't a horror film, it would immediately move to the top of the list because it would be something else. I mean, now I've had to fight a long time to get away from being the Friday the 13th guy, and I probably have done 10 Lifetime movies. And the ladies here all know what a Lifetime movie is. It's woman of power, rock high, women sort of thing. I mean, I've done comedies now. I've done, I would love to do a Western. I would love to do a drama. I mean, I really like drama. I'm very good at comedy. I think I have a good instinct for timing and understanding it, even though someone might not think what I was doing was funny, but I am pretty good at, I think I'm pretty good at that too. So anything that would be something that I probably haven't done, I would like to do that more. And I do a lot of pictures. I think I surprised you when I said I have 2 young people that I met at exactly the same kind of thing that's here, film festivals. One guy named Patrick Ray, and I saw one of his films at a film festival, and I was signing autographs at one of this thing, and somebody brought him up to me, and they said, "Oh, this is Patrick Ray." And the guy said, "Oh, wow, I really liked your film." And he goes, "Oh man," he goes, "this is so cool to meet you," because he's sort of kind of a horror guy. And I said, "No, you don't understand. I'm excited to meet you." not you excited to meet me, I'm excited to meet you because you're a really good filmmaker. I like the way you tell a story. And I will do your next picture for free. And I did. And I did actually 2 short films for him for free because this kid's got real talent, okay? And I want to do it. There's another guy named Jeremiah Kemp. You will see if you go to is it Vimeo? Is that what it's called? Vimeo. There's a film called Get Off My Porch. It's about the like Girl Scout cookie sellers from hell. They will not let this guy go. And I scored it for him. It's one of Patrick Ray's pictures. There's also a picture called Crestfallen. It's about 8 minutes long that I scored. It's quite powerful. It's an anti-suicide film. And we were going to screen it, but it had breasts and stuff. And I was sort of worried that there'd be young people here because it's pretty powerful. It's a powerful 8 minutes that stays with you. And once again, that movie is not verbal. And it's just me in the picture. So I really get to emote. And because I see the picture and the picture really spoke to me, same thing. I'm looking for that. I'm looking for that young Sean Cunningham. Someone with that vision, someone with the But nicer, Victor, thank you. But the person who's going to really, I can ride on their coattails. The great story is Harry Manfredini, who, there was this guy, Blake Edwards, I don't know if you've heard of him. He had done a bunch of movies, and I can't remember the composer that he used, but, and Blake said, I'm doing this picture, it's called The Pink Panther or something, and it might have been The Pink Panther. It was an early Mancini movie, and he says, I can't do it. I just don't have the time. But there's this kid, Henry Mancini. Actually, he did most of your last picture. He ghost wrote it for me. And if you really liked it, he could probably use the picture. And there you go. You just walked in and wham, and the rest is history. How many Blake Edwards movies did Mancini do? Like almost all the great ones, right? So, I mean, that's the kind of thing. You're looking for that person. And there's 2 kids, I believe, in this, Patrick Ray and Jeremiah Kemp, and I don't know, maybe there's one of you too. Maybe it's even Jessica. We're going to do some cowboy movies again.
Yeah.
So, anyway, did I answer that? I don't even know.
Yeah,
okay.
You did. Nice job. A+, another A+. Is there an established director that you would like to work with? I mean, way established, that you haven't? Wish list.
That wasn't in a phone conversation. This
I know.
is not fair.
I threw in a couple here.
I don't know. There's a lot of them. There's a lot of established directors who wouldn't hire me because they're usually tied to someone else. Let's see, will it be John Williams or Harry? What should I do? Is that a choice? And it's a really funny thing. In Hollywood, it's gotten to that. I don't really know. Someone who is willing to let me do something and even throw me out. I don't care. They could throw my music out or something, but at least have a chance to talk with someone like that and get the idea. I'm not a big fan of Scorsese, so I wouldn't do him. Even though he's a nice guy and he's Italian and all that, but he talks so fast it gets me nervous. But one of the things that happened, and this is a side thing, not even from your question, but when I first went to Hollywood from New York, and which is actually quite late, there used to be A films and A composers, and B films and B composers, and C and C and D and D, like that. And you would go around, and that's what you were. you were a D, maybe you could get a C film because you'd get a C director and then you'd get a C film. It's really changed a lot, not unlike the political situation where we have all these people up here and then everybody else. I mean, there's really a handful of composers who are really on the A list, and then it's literally everybody else. I mean, I didn't realize I have had movies where it might be Jerry Goldsmith or me, or it might be Lalo Schifrin or me. I'm going like, I'm up against Lalo Schifrin for a movie? Who in the world would hire me? I would hire Lalo Schifrin, It's just not going to happen. But I mean, and it became clear to me one day at 20th Century Fox where I got called in to meet the head of the music department, music supervisor, and give him my demo. And he listened to it, he sat with me, and he goes, wow, he goes, you're good, you're like a feature guy. And I went, okay, I'm a feature guy, cool. And he goes, I've got this picture, I'm going to put you on the list as possible composers. And I'm going like, wow, that's really cool. Well, of course, the list started with John Williams, went all the way down, and on page 3, we got to, Alan Ferguson and a few other, and then like about page 6, I was on the list. But, there wasn't, everybody was on the list, and the question is, you can't, there's no, if you hire John Williams, the studio or the producers, they're not going to go like, well, that's a really bad choice for your film score. It's not, somebody's got to really take a chance with someone, and that's why independent pictures and that's why independent filmmakers are where you've got to go, because you want to find that guy who's going to be the independent person who's going to say, giving you the shot. So that's what it is. It's probably, I would say it would be more of an independent person who I would like to work with.
Okay.
Wow, did I dodge that one? God.
Well, I think for a little bit, let's open up questions from the audience.
I don't want to say anything, but this microphone says snow on it.
Bob Snow.
Oh, it's Bob Snow. No, it says snow.
Let it snow. Yeah. Anybody have a question?
How about Spielberg?
I would, sure, who wouldn't want to work for Spielberg? But what I'm saying is, that's just not, I would like to work for God, too, but it's just not going to happen. I would like to work for Spielberg when he did the movie with the 2 trucks. What was that called? Duel. That's the guy I want to work for. That's the guy I want to work for. That Spielberg, because people are going to go, holy smoke, that guy knows how to make a film. And so that's what I'm saying. That's who I want to work for. Young Spielberg. Want to work for, pick somebody who's done great films, like just a pile of great films. Ron Howard. Ron Howard's another example.
How about T.H. Auto 38 did that movie way back when?
That's right. That's another one. Yeah. So what I'm saying is that I'm looking for that guy.
Yeah.
Because at this point, the chance of working for Spielberg is not even. That's worse than imagining the computer that can play anything.
Is there a lot of loyalty in Hollywood now compared to what it used to be, or you're just a number?
Is there a lot of loyalty?
Yeah.
There is some, and I always actually recognize that. I've had pictures where someone says, God, I'd love to use you on this picture, but I've had this guy do a couple of movies for me when we had no budget, and I finally got a few bucks here, and I'm going to let him do it. And I go like, good for you, because that's the guy I would like to be that guy, to work for that guy. There is that. There's a lot of star blanking going on where someone will hire someone because of their name or because of what they've done. And there's a lot of guys who can barely write their name who are scoring pictures.
Really?
Yes. I won't even say any names. But there's a lot of them, and you're hiring a guy and 25 ghostwriters. And the guy, I don't know how the guy has the cojones to even put his name on it.
Would you consider yourself old school?
I'm old. I don't know about the school.
Everything you've done in previous years is different the way it's done today.
It's done differently, and I've had to learn a lot. So if you were around earlier, I did these two workshop things. I always forget the word workshop. I did these two workshops, and I talked about keeping up with the new technology, keeping up with the new sounds, keeping up with the new ways of scoring. The way music scoring has changed. One of my lines not a line, it's an actually true story. I had scored a film, another guy, a writer, a short film that he had done, and he said to me, "Get that melody out of my film. What are you trying to do?" I know, that's sort of what I said. Like, I was trying to put a little drama in there, like some character or something. No, just give me like that tone, I want that tone. And it's not a score, it becomes sound effect. It's really just it's sort of a total sound effect. And there's a lot of scores these days you hear that are really just very percussive. It's almost like music as sound effect. And then the dramatic, the idea of melody or stuff like that. I mean, don't get me wrong, there are plenty of movies that have that, but so many films these days, and of course the advent of putting pop songs in movies, which, how easy can I push you out of a movie, just by like, well, we interrupt this plot for 2.5 minutes while we hear a Britney Spears song, and how many, this is what cracks me up, it's like, oh, we'll get that song in the movie, it'll be a big hit. I mean, how many people do you know go to a movie to hear the song that's in it? I don't know. I just don't get it. I don't get the value of it. And records, of course, is a waste of money these days. No, they're not saving costs. I'm telling you right now, it's a lot of money. It's merchandising, and it's a tie-in stuff, things like that. I can tell you that when I was working at Carolco, which is under now, but I did a couple of movies there, and when I was doing, I did a movie called Iron Eagle 3. It was Aces, the one with the old airplanes. Did you see it? Lou Gossett and Sonny Shiba. It's a really cool flick. They were working on Terminator, I think, at the time also, and they paid $1 million to what's the band? It's not AC/DC, and it's not Nirvana.
U2?
No. Guns N' Roses. They paid $1 million. Thank you. I know it was something like that. Anyway, they paid $1 million to Guns N' Roses to do the song, which was not even in the movie. Was it at the end credits or something?
Right.
$1 million. I could have had cannolis for life. So I mean, what I'm saying is that there are these things that happen, and those are in the minds of other people. Like, would you go see Terminator? Oh man, because there's that new Guns N' Roses things on the end credits. They're lining up for that, Go figure. Guns N' Roses are Guns N' Roses. They're very, very popular, very good. I can't remember their name, but.
Another question?
What time does the party start? Is there any wine left? Literally anything that comes to your mind.
What's the creative process for you? I mean, how do you start, and where do the ideas come from for a score?
The ideas always. This goes back to the first question. I'm going to tell you this, and you go like, yeah, you're making that shit up. You're just telling us this. When I was a kid, 6, 7 years old, and I would play the Lone Ranger or baseball or whatever we were playing at the time. We didn't have things. We were young. It was a long time ago. My first shaving cream was just called Spice. It hadn't even gotten old. That's how long ago it is. I just make this stuff up, just for you, Marty. But I used to hear music with what I would do whatever I happen to be doing, in my head I heard music. I look at something and I actually hear music in my head. I don't, sometimes I have no idea how to notate it. I didn't know how to notate it. I didn't know even what I was hearing. I didn't know any instruments and stuff like that. But I did hear it, so I always sort of hear that. My creative process, we talked about this in the workshops. See, I'm glad you guys are here, because otherwise I'd be stuck on that one word. Is that more often than not, especially if it's a scary film or something like that, I don't want to know the plot. I don't want to know what's happening, because I want to get the visceral effect of the movie. I don't even like to read the script, because I want that movie to hit me exactly the way it's going to hit you, because you're only going to see it one time. I'm going to see it hundreds of times. So, but I want to get that first one. You only get one shot at the first time. So I like to see it that way. Other pictures, it may be a little bit different. But I try to look for these things. I look for the theme, if there's a theme to the film. I look for character. I look for the places in the film where the plot is moved forward, where there's changes of character, where there's important pieces of information. Again, in the second workshop today, I said workshop without it being asked.
Yeah.
In the second workshop today, we talked about the composer as dramatist. A film composer is really a dramatist. I look for that in the story. And then I tried to, in my mind, imagine, what does that sound like to me? How does that sound? And sometimes again, in the workshop, I talked about color. And sometimes I'll just play chords. Try different chords and come up with sonorities. And I go, oh, that's the one that I hear. I don't know what that is. And we talked about naming chords and not naming chords. And I just say, that's the color. I like that color. I like that sonority. It speaks to me that way. So I try to deal with the elements of the drama, not worry so much about what I'm going to write, but to try to understand what the director, what the writer has in mind in that story, and try to find those things that sonically evoke those things to me. And then what I'll do is maybe take 2 or 3 sheets of music paper and just write little sketches of little things. It might just be a couple bars long. It might even just be a chord. And then I may try to fiddle around with that chord and see what happens. It's very much improvisation. Speaking of, I got to get that book that you bought.
David Byrne.
I'm buying that from you. So anyway, he talks about, there's one chapter there called Composition as Improvisation, which is really the way to do it. So I'll do that, and I'll put those all together. And then when I do see the picture, I look for those things in the picture. And I try to find those spots. For example, a well-written script will have, something might happen in page 17 that's going to happen. In page 34, something that relates to that happens there. It becomes something, and then it may happen in 57, it may happen in 78, and then it may happen at 112. I try to find those places. When I write a score, I not only just write a scene, I try to think of the scene as just pieces of a big, huge thing, so that this it could be a prop or something. Maybe it's a certain knife, or it's an urn, or it's a piano, like a little piano box thing, or it's a memory of something. It could be anything that's in the plot that is going to change as the arc of the character changes. I look for those places in the picture, and that's where I start to sew together the music so that it makes sense, and either crescendos or decrescendos, or deteriorates or gets more bent. Is that a word?
Bent. Yeah.
More bent. You know what I'm saying? More bent. Not more bent. More bent. Anyway, that's sort of what My process is I don't know what other people's process. Some people write from the beginning to the end. I don't do that all the time. Sometimes I just, if I know one scene, and I'll just start there and maybe go like this or whatever. But it's always a little bit different.
What's your what instrument do you like the best?
What instrument do I like the best?
Is there one particular instrument that really stands out in your mind as this is the one I like the best?
Oh God, I don't know. I was, like I said, I was a saxophone player, and saxophone is almost verboten now in film music. They're going, that's jazz, get it out of here. I'm actually doing a score right now to a Lifetime movie, which will be out in November, tune in. It's called The Dark Plan, and it's kind of like the talented Mr. Ripley for Lifetime. And what the temp score to that was the score for Body Heat. You remember Body Heat with Kathleen Turner and William Hurt. And there's that wonderful theme. The saxophone is an alto sax, just gorgeous. But it just puts a time stamp on that film. It just goes 1980, you know, smoky jazz sax film noir movie. I mean, I've done a film noir movie where they said, hey, play sax. I did a movie called La Gonna Cara Blonde. If you ever get a chance to see it, it's a cool little film. And I played the sax on that. So that was sort of cool. But in this movie, like everybody who sees it, they go, well, we love that temp score, but that saxophone, you can't do that. It's just not there, but it's just hot and steamy. It's really, it was a great score. That was kind of a cool flick.
I'm going to ask you a little question in here since you mentioned temp scores.
Yeah.
Could you explain the concept of temp love?
Temp love, the concept of temp love. Temp love is the good and bad part of temp scores. Temp scores are used quite often in films, features, or even in shorts for that matter, where it helps. First of all, it's really an aid to the editor and the director to get a feeling of how your music flows. You grab a score from one of your CDs or something that you like, a classical piece. It could be anything, and you just drop it in, and you go like, "Ooh, that's starting to feel nice. I like the way that's going." And then you basically cut the picture to it. Temp love happens, and there's a good part of the temp score. Temp score is really good because quite often for a composer, a director or producer may not verbally be able to verbify, if I could use a George Bush word, verbify his feelings concerning the music that he wants. But he goes, I like this. And then you go, oh, I see what you like, I got it, But temp love is, I want this. And then there's temp marriage with mortgage and children and a house and a car and another home somewhere else. That's where it's just like, it's almost impossible. You're never going to please the person because they're so attached to that score that's there that they can't get rid. You're never going, no matter what you do, even no matter how hard you try to be like it, it's a difficult thing to do. It happens a lot more in TV than it does in features. But it does happen in features, and again, I told you there was one I had to just, I can't do this. He wanted it too fast. I could have done it, but it just was like, I felt like I wasn't doing anything other than copying Hans Zimmer, which, I didn't want to do. So a temp score is really good for that. I'll put a plug in for my library here. Those of you who are making films, and if you're looking for music, then just drop in to temp with or even use. Believe me, I've scored a lot of the Lifetime films where we used half of the library and half that I rescored with new music. It's called Big Score Music. You can go there and listen to, there's every kind of music from soup to nuts. There's 100 different composers, European composers. We have classical music, we have urban, we have, you name it, we've got it. And I've got a bunch of music there. And, a lot of composers from Hollywood have put music in the library. And it's really cool, and it's really great for you to just pick music. And it's almost all film music. It's really aimed at film and TV. These are cues. They're not just, and you can chop them up, do whatever you want. And it really sometimes helps you cut your picture and get an idea of your flow. Just don't fall in love with it. That's the only thing.
Okay, another question from the audience?
What about
Go ahead. What about
electronic music? How do you feel about that?
I love electronic. It's all electronic now. Even though it's orchestral, it's electronic. When you say electronic music, help me so that we all understand that we're still talking about the same thing. Do you mean techno, or do you mean
Technical music? Yes. No.
give me a score that you consider to be electronic?
Sorry.
Okay, no, I mean like Stockhausen is electronic, but I mean that's a whole other thing. That may not be what you're talking about.
Getting away from, say, doing a piano score.
Instead of a piano or an orchestra, then it becomes more electrical.
Yeah, it's all electrical, and it's up and down, and
You know, you hear this as a cliche, but I'll say it anyway. If it works, it works. I think that you can do some interesting things with, and sometimes it's a really percussive electronic score, depending on the film, might really work beautifully. And getting away from strings and woodwinds and percussion and stuff like that, or when I say percussion, I meant like your standard timpani stuff. I mean, I'm surprised nobody asked me about gear yet. So somebody asked me.
Oh, I was.
And I don't mean
waiting to
Richard.
do that.
This is gear stuff. But sometimes you can actually do a score just with ambient sounds, found sounds. I mean, I have like percussion kits that are made out of steel drums and oil cans and hot water heaters and stuff like that. And you hit them, and it's very percussive, but it's not it's just not a drum. You know, you put a mic inside a hot water heater and whack it with a hammer. Boy, you got a pretty cool sound. You know, again, it's go home whistling it, but nonetheless, it's a very effective sound. So, and there's a huge amount of that stuff available. There are huge. Those of you who know who John Cage is, he started doing prepared piano, where you would put screws and nuts and bolts inside the strings and then play them to get a really sort of funny. There are huge libraries of just prepared piano. There's a lot of stuff that you hear. I would bet that you have no idea that it's actually a piano. Or there's one of my favorite sounds that you hear in a lot of movies. You remember when you were a kid, you had this thing called a Super Bowl? You bounce it, and that thing would just like take off. Well, a lot of percussionists have mallets with Super Balls on the end of them, and if you get a big bass drum, and instead of hitting the bass drum, you just drag that Super Ball across the skin, it is a sound that's just, or drag it across a gong, or drag it across a cymbal. There are also other things. I don't know. Does anybody know what a waterphone is? Yeah. Waterphones came up in the 50s. They actually sell them now. But the guy who invented the waterphone, here's what it is. It's a big metal salad bowl, about this big. Okay, the first one. He took a muffler from a car and put the muffler into the salad bowl, facing up, and then he welded a bunch of bars on the lip of the salad bowl. Okay? Then he poured water into the salad bowl, and he took a bow that you would play a cello or a bass with, and he starts bowing these metal bars with the bow while moving the water in the bowl, so that this thing is going like, it's like just this horrible metallic sound, but because the water is changing density as the vibrations are happening, you get this and you hear it a lot, and you're like, what the heck is that? And now they make them, they're waterphones, you can buy them, You don't have to get a salad bowl or a Buick muffler or whatever. But, I mean, there's a lot of that sort of stuff. So, And you can purchase these things and do all kinds of stuff with them. I'm really into that. I like that. I'm also into very aleatoric music. There are places in Friday the 13th where I've written things, for example, where it's very agitated kind of string writing. And I can tell you I didn't even write a note. All I did was write a rhythm. The only thing on the page is just rhythms. There's no notes delineated for the players. And then at the very beginning of the piece, I assign a set of notes or a scale. Let's say it would be some scale, some demented scale that I made up that doesn't have a name, okay? But it's an assortment of notes. And they look at all those notes and I say, okay, just follow the rhythms and play whatever note you feel like in that group. But follow the rhythms and play them incredibly accurate with a lot of energy. So it becomes almost like a percussion sound made by an orchestra. But the thing is that I assign one note to everybody, a starting note, so that my first chord contains all the notes that I've delineated. But from there on, they're free to jump to any note that they want in the group. And if you get 40 people doing that, obviously you're going to get some sort of cacophonous. You would think of it as cacophonous, but I'm not doing it as music as pitch. It's music as density and rhythm. And so that when it's over, it's just, I said, I want you to play this as precisely as possible with as much grit and energy. Get up on the chair and just dig in. You can't play a wrong note. As long as you're in that group, you can't play a wrong note. Just, it's the rhythm that I'm worried about. And I literally had a concertmaster go, he goes, that was some amazing string writing. But the fact was I didn't write any notes. So I really get into aleatoric stuff. There's a composer, John Corigliano, who did Altered States, and the wonderful movie, The Red Violin. Remember that one? Oh. Anyway, he does a lot of what they call aleatoric things, but again, he's controlling the pitch. I did this in a score called Deep Star 6, where I had 12 woodwind players, and I just draw a box of stuff where there might be 6 or 7 little fragments of information, like just little fragments of stuff. They are free to play any one of those fragments at any speed, at any volume, at any time during this certain amount of time in music. And you get some woodwind writing that people go like, wow, that sounds so complicated. And the fact is that I'm controlling the pitch by assigning the pitch, but I have no control over what it actually comes out like. But I know it's going to come out and crazy, especially if you get some players who feel free enough. I remember in the original Friday the 13th where I had kids from Manhattan School of Music, and there's a thing at Friday the 13th where I wrote an X note with a slide, like a trumpet note, where you go, a trumpet would call it a doit. It's like that, okay? So I just put an X and a thing, which means hit a note and then sort of slide up. Doit. They call it a doit because that's what it sounds like. Anyway, all the violin players went to the same note. And I said, you guys are used to playing in horns. I mean, they all want to play the same note because they usually all play together, you know. And they said, well, what note is that? I said, it's a high note. They said, well, we all did play a high note. And I said, it's the highest note. They said, we all played the highest note. So then I said, stop. I said, okay, you're C sharp, you're D. I said, okay, now do it. You know, and all at once it becomes this ugly thing, but again, it's a rhythmic, non-musical sound that what I was looking for. I wasn't looking for, if I wanted everybody to play E, I would have told them all to play E. I would have written an E. But they're not used to playing free. Yeah. Fiddle players are very fiddly, But I got them so loose, it was really funny. And there's a few places in Friday the 13th, if you go back and listen to the score, there's a thing that I called them random trills and accents. And I gave them pitches, again, where I could control the pitch content, but they could play them wherever they wanted, and they would trill, like that, or accent, like that sort of thing. And they at random in a rhythm in a certain amount of time. And I got them to the point where they were really like cool about doing it. They didn't mind. She's playing better trills than I'm going to fix her, and I'm going to do this. And so it became a contest. And eventually we just called it random T&A. And they loved that. That was just like, oh my God, are we going to do any random T&A? It got to be a joke, but they loved it, and it worked really, really well because it was a sound. So it's almost like taking instruments and making what might even be construed as an electronic sound. But in certain cases, electronic music really works well.
You're listening to music, which you do all the time. And what do you get wow, where it makes you tingle inside? That something that comes once in a while hits you?
Yeah, and a good wine does that too. But
You're thinking of the party.
Is there a certain type of music that
I react very physically to a lot of music. But if the question was something like what's on your iPod, you would flip if you saw what was on my iPod. I mean, I've got Dalby, George Crumb, Stravinsky, Sinatra, a bunch of country western albums, Sarah Brightman. I've yielded my soul to the preacher. Born to Fly, Sarah Evans.
Canadian.
I have Earth, Wind, and Fire. I have Stan Getz. I've got everything you can imagine on that iPod, and I find every one of them. There's something in there that just speaks to me musically. There's an energy or something. I mean, that Sarah Evans album. If you ever want to do a country album and learn how to produce country tunes, they're masterful, and her lyrics are great and stuff like I really like that. And there's an album called Sinatra with Strings. I think it's maybe the best Sinatra album ever done. Don Costa did the arrangements. It's a collector's item, but you can get it online. I got mine online, and I'll burn you a copy if you need it. But it kills me. It just kills me. And I have some, because I'm Italian, I have some, what's his name? The blind guy, come on, help. Workshops. It's not workshops. Bocelli. I have some Bocelli. I have that. I'm all over the place. I mean, on the way here, I listen to, like, all kinds of things, just all over the place. But every one of them is very much... But I'm very easily distracted by music. If I'm sitting somewhere, a lot of times I can't not listen to what's being played.
What happened to your accordion?
My accordion got flooded in the wonderful basement apartment home that I bought in Teaneck, New Jersey. That whenever you see a home with a basement, and the basement just looks completely pristine, don't buy that place because they fixed it up. And you know the water's going to be coming through the floor any minute. And the first rainstorm, there was about this much water in the basement. And I saw my $2,000 Italian accordion going across the room, and it was pretty much, that was gone. That was the end of that. But I wish the accordion, I've got samples of accordion. I still play it. If you ever get to the Ponte Vecchio, you get to the other side, not the Firenze side, but the other side. There's a little guy there. I've got a picture of him, I think, on my website. If you go to Harry Manfredini, look at the pictures. There is a guy there. I got the worst headache. He is playing the accordion upside down. He's turned the accordion this way. The keys are here, and the bass notes are here. And so like when he's playing this way, the notes are going down. And when he's playing this way, the notes are going up. And I'm standing there watching, and he's playing. And I'm standing there watching, like, how the hell are you doing that? He goes, I picked it up, and I taught myself how to play, and no one ever told me it was supposed to be played the other way. And it's just like, I don't know, it's just crazy. But, yeah, no, I did play accordion for the cool thing about my lessons when I was a kid, though, in high school, my teacher was a jazzer, and he was a keyboard player as well. So I used to have a 2-hour lesson once a week, and the first hour I played accordion and he played saxophone, and we would play tunes. And I would have to accompany him, and then I would have to play jazz on the accordion and stuff like that. And then the next hour I played the saxophone, and he accompanied me. So I learned a lot of songs that way. It was a really good experience. He was an incredible, another Italian fellow, Josephine Gadella. He was a great saxophone player. You were going to say?
Here, during the workshops, we mentioned a lot of men composers. Are there many women composers? I know Rachel Portman, but...
I was going to say, well, there's Rachel Portman.
But that's the only one I can think of. Why
there's
is that?
There's not a lot of women who do film scores. I don't know why. There are some, and they just haven't come to the fore. They write a lot of songs, that's for sure. There's plenty of great women songwriters. I don't know why. I really don't know the answer. Shirley Walker is another one. Does anyone know who Shirley Walker is? Shirley Walker single-handedly put Danny Elfman on the map. She was his orchestrator between her and Steve Bartek. I mean, Danny Elfman would write something and say, okay, you guys turn it into an orchestra. And Shirley Walker probably was the orchestrator on all the first couple of Batman movies, and she ended up actually doing the Batman TV series. And she's passed on now, but she was a tremendous composer, very, very good. Good. Yes, ma'am?
Is electronic music the same as synthesized?
I heard, the only word I heard was synthesized.
Is electronic? You were talking about electronic music.
Oh yeah, no, that was why I asked him what do you mean by electronic music, because synthesized music is synthesized, but there's also sampled music. In other words, like when I'm working in my room and looking at the movie, I have literally an entire orchestra at my beck and call, and they are samples of strings, samples of brass. They're really brass. I mean, it's not like a synthesized brass sound. It's an actual trumpet. So there's that gray line where you say, I'm using an electronic medium to create an acoustic sound. But the reality is it is electronic. It's zeros and ones. You know, it's digital. So when you asked about electronic, that's what made me sort of like go, what do you mean? I can tell you another fun story about Columbia. You know, the first electronic music was not Columbia Princeton. It was a joint thing, and the Columbia Princeton Music Lab was on 120th and Broadway, which is where the Cotton Club was. In fact, it's right across the street from the Cotton Club. And Columbia had a certain system, and Princeton had a certain system. And I was at Columbia. At Columbia, you had to make all your own sounds. You could not use the synthesizer. You went there, and there was all this really avant-garde stuff at the time. This is like 72. You were just children. Anyway, it was like 72, 73, something like that. Anyway, we had to make our own sounds. Meanwhile, there's a Buchla and a Moog and all of this stuff sitting there, which we couldn't even put our hands on, because that was the Princeton way of doing things. We had to do stuff, physically actually do it. I mean, and hysterically funny things would be done. Like, for example, let's say you wanted to do a rhythm. You couldn't. This is so stupid. Not stupid. It's creative and it's fun and it's crazy. But, for example, could you hold this a second? I'll talk louder. What we had to do was this. Let's say you wanted to create a rhythm. Well, you had a tape player, right? And if you had a really good tape player, it played at 15 inches per second. But most everybody only had 7.5. So you'd say to yourself, okay, the tape is going to go at 7.5 inches per second. So if I want a beat, let's say, every 7.5 inches, I'm going to put a piece of tape. In the middle, I would put paper tape, leader. So you'd have this thing that would go doop, 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 because there was no sound for the paper, but every time the tape would be. So then you say, okay, well, doop, 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 doop ain't much of interest in terms of rhythm. So you'd say, okay, well, I want to do 2/8 notes. Well, 2/8 notes, that would be two, let's see, you divide the 7 into 4, then you break that in half, and then so that you get your tape measure out, and you cut the tape there, and then and put in your little piece of tape there. And if you wanted to get an even more intricate rhythm, you had to do so. And then, of course, in order to get something that was long enough, or a few seconds long, you had to have this stupid piece of tape that was, 25 feet long. So here you are in the studio with microphone stands and everything you can imagine in a big circle all the way around the room like that with one tape recorder. And then you turn the tape recorder on and the tape would go around the room. And it would go, it would play the rhythm as the tape went by. Then the fun thing would be to do, like you would then you'd say, like, well, what am I doing with this tape? So I remember I did one thing where I took Stars and Stripes Forever, but I recorded it on this piece of tape. So instead of hearing da 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 da, you heard da 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 da. I'm going, this is cool, But anyway, so it got really, really hands-on creative, as opposed to sitting with a Moog and actually pushing keys and doing stuff like that. So in a way, it was kind of more fun to do. But that was Columbia's way of doing it, was you had to actually hands-on splicing and dicing your way into a piece of music. And there was a guy who I don't want to say he won a Pulitzer, but I know he won some award. He was one of the composers at Columbia. He wrote a piece called Bowery Bum. And he made the entire piece with 2 rubber bands and a tape recorder. The whole piece was made just by plucking a rubber band, getting different pitches, you get thick rubber band, thin rubber band, and snapping it, and doing all these things, and making recordings of all that stuff, and then literally just laying all that stuff on top. And it was called Bowery Bum, and I can't think of his name. He was, I think, Hungarian or something, but it was a pretty cool piece, actually. So there was that whole school of hands-on, what they call music concrete, found sounds and stuff like that. So anyway, you're supposed to ask me about gear.
Okay. Yeah, this will be our last question. They're going to
Well, what kind of gear do I have? Okay. In my room, I have one keyboard. It's a Yamaha 88 key. It's called a Motif, and it's like a piano. It's not like an organ. Sometimes you see synthesizers that have organ kind of keys. This has actual keys that go down and up like on a piano, and they're velocity sensitive, so it knows how hard I hit it or how soft I hit it and everything like that. I have my main computer that is the master. The master is a quad Mac. I use a thing called Digital Performer. In the Digital Performer program, I have every instrument in the orchestra that you can ever want. Then I used to have 14, but now I've got it down to 9 PCs that are all slaves to this computer. And on each one of those, there are thousands of sounds. Some might be strings, some might be percussion, some might be like these crazy percussion sounds, effects, voices, choruses, ethnic instruments, didgeridoos, almost everything you can imagine I have a sample of. And so that they all feed into this Digital Performer program. And just like I said, I sit at this keyboard and go, oh, I need a flugelhorn. I dial up my flugelhorn sample, I put it on the thing, I sit down at the keyboard, and it's a flugelhorn. And it's actually a really good flugelhorn. Chris Hine horns is the ones that I would use. He's a really great sounding flugelhorn, very smoky, jazzy. And the cool thing about it is it's got a, does anybody know who Chet Baker is? Okay, wow, good. It's a Chet Bakery kind of jazzy flugelhorn, and it's just so much fun to play. So you get your nice minor 9 chord from the strings, and you put some Chet Baker on top of it, light up a cigar, get yourself a martini, wonder what happened to my life. No. Anyway, I really thank you for inviting me, and I hope some of this was entertaining or something.
Well, thank you, everybody.
I'm looking forward to scoring all of your movies.
For free.
Oh, I shouldn't have said that.
And let's give Jessica a big hand for a great job. You know, one thing that happened last night at the party is we were trying to talk Harry into sitting in on keyboards with our band, the director's cut, and he said, well, no, I can't do that because I do saxophone. I'm a saxophone guy. So if any one of you has got a saxophone in the trunk of your car, we might talk him into it. Thank you. Party time.